In the heart of Texas, where basketball passion runs deep and loyalty is carved into the culture, the story of the San Antonio Spurs began. Long before the world knew them as one of the most respected and successful franchises in NBA history, the Spurs were a dream in the making, a team that would rise from obscurity to become the symbol of excellence, teamwork, and discipline in professional basketball. Their journey was not built overnight. It was the product of perseverance, intelligence, and an unbreakable bond between players, coaches, and fans. The franchise's story started in 1967, not in San Antonio, but in Dallas, as the Dallas Chaparrals of the American Basketball Association, ABA. At that time, basketball was still fighting for attention in Texas, a state that lived and breathed football. The Chaparrals struggled to draw crowds, and though they had talent, they lacked identity. When the ABA faced financial troubles, the Chaparrals were sold to a group of San Antonio businessmen who decided to give the team a new home and a new life. In 1973, the San Antonio Spurs were born, and that decision changed basketball in Texas forever. The early Spurs were defined by excitement and energy. The team immediately became a local hit, thanks to their fast-paced play and the electric atmosphere inside Hemisphere Arena. San Antonio fans were loud, loyal, and proud, and they adopted the Spurs as their own family. The franchise's first true star was George, the Iceman, Gervin, a player whose smooth scoring touch and effortless style turned him into a legend. Gervin's finger roll became iconic, and his scoring titles made the Spurs a competitive force in the ABA. When the ABA merged with the NBA in 1976, the Spurs entered the new league with a fighting spirit. They didn't have the resources or big city glamour of other teams, but they had heart and grit. The late 1970s and early 1980s were marked by strong performances but painful playoff exits. The team played with flair but struggled to take the next step toward championship glory. Still, Gervin kept the Spurs relevant, putting up incredible numbers and earning respect across the league. As the 1980s progressed, the Spurs faced transitions. Gervin's era faded, and the team looked for a new identity. In 1989, the franchise found its foundation for the future when it selected a young center from the U.S. Naval Academy, David Robinson. Nicknamed the Admiral, Robinson was a game-changer. His arrival in San Antonio sparked hope and energy. Fans saw in him not just an athlete, but a leader, a man of discipline and integrity who reflected the values of the city itself. Robinson's impact was immediate. His combination of athleticism, intelligence, and humility made him the perfect cornerstone for the franchise. In the early 1990s, the Spurs became one of the most consistent teams in the Western Conference. They played tough defense, shared the ball, and built a culture based on mutual respect. Yet, despite. As the 2000s began, the San Antonio Spurs were no longer outsiders. They were champions with a clear identity and a future built on unshakable principles. The first championship in 1999 wasn't just a victory, it was the birth of a dynasty in the making. With David Robinson's leadership, Tim Duncan's steady brilliance, and Gregg Popovich's uncompromising system, the Spurs were ready to redefine what greatness meant in the NBA. The early years of the new millennium saw the team evolve. Robinson was aging, but he remained the emotional anchor of the franchise. Duncan, meanwhile, had emerged as the quiet superstar, the embodiment of everything the Spurs stood for: humility, consistency, and excellence without ego. Unlike many stars of his generation, Duncan never chased fame or spotlight. His focus was solely on winning. His game wasn't flashy, but it was pure: footwork, fundamentals, and flawless decision-making. He became the foundation upon which Popovich would build a culture of sustainable success. In the 2002-03 season, the Spurs made their next major leap. Robinson, in his final year, was determined to go out a champion, and Duncan was at the peak of his powers. That season, Duncan was unstoppable, dominating both ends of the court with quiet authority. The team was balanced and unselfish, with players like Tony Parker, a young French point guard, and Manu Ginóbili, an energetic Argentine guard, adding fresh energy and creativity. Parker brought speed and craftiness, Ginóbili brought passion and unpredictability. Together with Duncan, they would become one of the most unique and successful trios in NBA history. The 2003 playoffs were a display of resilience and heart. The Spurs faced the mighty Los Angeles Lakers, the reigning champions led by Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. Many expected the Lakers to continue their dominance, but the Spurs were determined to take the crown. In a defining moment, they defeated the Lakers, ending their reign and clearing the path to another championship run. They advanced through the playoffs with focus and unity, culminating in a finals victory over the New Jersey Nets. The image of David Robinson holding the trophy alongside Tim Duncan symbolized a perfect passing of the torch, from one era of leadership to another. When Robinson retired after that championship, the Spurs didn't just lose a legend, they entered a new phase. The Twin Towers era had ended, but the Spurs were evolving into a global powerhouse. Parker and Ginóbili continued to grow under Popovich's guidance, while Duncan became the heart of everything. Popovich, often demanding and blunt, pushed his players to their limits but also created an environment of trust and accountability. The team's chemistry, both on and off the court, became their secret weapon. In 2005, the Spurs once again found themselves at the top. The league was changing, new stars were emerging, and the game was faster, but the Spurs remained grounded in their identity. As the celebrations from the 2014 championship faded, the San Antonio Spurs stood at a crossroads in their legendary journey. They had reached the pinnacle of perfection, playing basketball so fluid and selfless that fans and analysts called it poetry in motion. But even the greatest dynasties must evolve, and for the Spurs, the challenge was not only to stay competitive but to maintain their identity in a rapidly changing NBA. Tim Duncan, Tony Parker, and Manu Ginóbili, three men who had carried the franchise through more than a decade of greatness, were nearing the twilight of their careers. Gregg Popovich, the architect behind it all, faced the task of guiding an aging core while preparing for a new generation. Yet, true to the Spurs culture, the focus remained on discipline, team play, and humility. There was no panic, no desperate trades, no rash decisions. The Spurs would move forward with patience, just as they always had. After their 2014 triumph, the 2014-15 season began with high hopes, but the grind of success took its toll. Injuries and fatigue slowed the team, and although the Spurs remained strong, they were eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by the Los Angeles Clippers in a heartbreaking Game 7. It marked the beginning of the end for the original, Big Three era, but it also showed the team's refusal to quit. Every setback in San Antonio was treated as a lesson, not a failure. The Spurs quietly prepared for the next chapter. In Kawhi Leonard, they saw the future, a quiet, hard-working forward with massive potential. Popovich and Duncan had mentored him patiently, teaching him the Spurs' values, consistency, selflessness, and calm under pressure. Leonard was not loud or flamboyant, he was efficient, serious, and precise, the perfect embodiment of the Spurs' philosophy. By the 2015-16 season, Leonard had blossomed into one of the best two-way players in the league. His defense was unmatched, and his offensive game had matured beautifully. The Spurs posted one of the best regular season records in franchise history, finishing 67-15. But even with that dominance, the playoff stage once again reminded them how unforgiving basketball could be. The Oklahoma City Thunder, led by Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, ended their run in the second round. After that season, the NBA lost one of its quietest legends. Tim Duncan, after 19 seasons, 5 championships, and 2 MVPs, decided to retire. He left the game the same way he had played it, with humility and grace, without fanfare or farewell tours. His retirement marked the end of an era, not just for San Antonio but for basketball itself. For nearly 2 decades, Duncan had been the Spurs' heartbeat, setting a standard of excellence that few could match. His presence would be missed, but his influence would remain forever. With Duncan gone, the Spurs entered a new phase led by Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge, a skilled big man who had joined the team in 2015. Popovich adjust.